No, I don't. At all of our neighbors at school are. Okay. It's a C. Yes, I have love this.
Thank you for coming to the Vickery House today. We have some special guests here, along with our speaker, and we're very glad that you're here. I'd like Sharon Housley to come up first. She's our vice president, and she'll introduce the speaker.
We are so lucky. This is our luck this year for restarting a lot of research on a lot of sites that we haven't yet touched. Is starting to gear up, and we're so lucky that we have Tamara Spy and Kennedy at Kennedy. And they are from they're instructors here at the University of North Georgia, and Tamara's specialty. She's the head of the history and
Psychology and philosophy.
Yes, and Kennedy is in.
I'm also same department.
In the same department, but they're here today showing how they're doing research on historical sites, and they're working on Fort Floyd, which we had a presentation on previously last year. But this year we have some new tools and some new work to better locate that, so that we can actually finish the certification on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Tamara.
All right. So, hi, and welcome to the University of North Georgia. And probably most of you have been here multiple times to the Vickery House. Because Vickery is a historic house, and we don't have everything wired. If we were in a classroom, you'd just normally be able to fire up a computer and a projector. So we've got a little bit of a tech issue here, but we'll talk through it and see what happens. Thank you for inviting us. I really do appreciate it. And I wanted to let you know, so when I first spoke with Rachel and Sharon in the spring, and they invited me to speak, I had a research trip planned. So I was going to go back up to the National Archives over the summer, follow up on Sarah Hall's research, and look for some of the kind of holes that she had indicated, right? My research trip fell through, so I reached out and I said, look, I don't have anything to add, but what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I'd like to talk with all of you all about research plans, and then to kind of think about a research design and how we can help you achieve your research goals, right? Where we can pitch in, and what are the resources that we have, and what kinds of timeframes do we have to be able to work towards your goals. So I thought that we could spend some time doing that. But first, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Kendi Altizer. Kendi is an archaeologist. I'm the historian part of this outfit here. I'm a historian of Latin America and an ethnohistorian of Latin America. Kendi is an archaeologist, and I'm just going to turn it over to you and talk for a little while.
Sure. So Tam's keeping a secret too. She actually is also an archaeologist. She did that way back in the day. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to be here. I'm going into my third year. This is kind of scary. It's going really fast, really fast. Here at Dahlonega. My specialty is actually in historical archaeology. I work on plantation systems down on the coast of South Carolina. But I also do a number of other things that I think might be helpful as we're thinking about Fort Floyd and what that means, and maybe what's left of it. Being an archaeologist, if you want to put a shovel in the ground, the first thing that we do is we come up with research questions. We don't ever do anything destructive without the plan, because once you dig it up, you can't put it back. It is a destructive technique. So one of the things that we have started over the course of the last 20 to 30 years are a series of remote sensing techniques. And what we have available to us here on the campus is ground penetrating radar. It's a non-invasive technique. It uses a radar system to essentially take a nice picture of what's below surface. And with calibration, lots of calibration and some post-processing, you may actually get some really good data. And we had started that process last spring with my cultural resources management class and thinking about what may be left of Fort Floyd and what we could see of maybe some sort of early remnant before they built the Price Memorial. So we've done some preliminary research. I've taught the students how to push the carriage. It literally looks like a baby carriage. If you didn't know, you would think it was somebody's running cart. If you've seen one of those trike running carts, that's what it looks like, the one that we have anyway. It does have an antenna system that runs along the ground, and then that connects to the computer brain up top. It collects data in 2D and also in 3D. So it's pretty cool stuff, and very non-invasive. So literally it would give us a snapshot of what would be under the earth, under the surface of the earth. And I think that is a great way to really kind of get an idea if it's even worth it to do archaeology. And one of the things that we're doing, particularly here on campus, but it's a broader theme in archaeology here in the Southeast, is we're very cognizant that these are not our lands, right? These did not originally belong to us. So we want to collaborate. We don't want to do anything that Indigenous groups wouldn't want us to do. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't do GPR, where we think we would have the best shot of actually seeing stuff, is because we're just not that far along. We need to consult. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad to be here today, is to talk to you about that and kind of get a feel for how you're feeling about it. If it might be something that we could pursue, or if it's something maybe you want to put on the back burner and we go ahead with historical research until we have a better idea. I feel like we have plenty of time. That site's not going anywhere. And if we all kind of talk about it and think our way through it, then we're going to come up with a bigger plan, and maybe a better one too. One of the nice things about technology is we keep evolving. Like, it keeps getting better and better and better. GPR is great. So we might use that as one technique. There's also resistivity. It's going to show you different kinds of things. And then we're probably going to come up with some new technology here in the next several years that might actually be better than what we have now. So there's always the hope that we never need to put a shovel in the ground, unless you guys want to. If you feel like that's the way to go, then I'm happy to assist in that effort. But really, our goal here really is to get a sense for what you want and how you would like to see that site treated. I would also want to consult with any other Indigenous groups that are interested in this area, so we can hear everybody's voice and maybe collaboratively. Did you fix it?
See, yeah. I did something, I don't know if I fixed it. Who's next over?
I don't know. Next page.
No, I put a folder in there, I think, oh, wait a second, GPR.
Here it is.
If this works, I exported all the slides.
Oh, there's your JPEGs. Okay. Marks. So slideshow.
Longest you can talk faster.
You're gonna have
You're gonna have to talk faster.
Okay. Okay. There's a reason why I keep them around.
We just do one.
We need yeah, you can just do one and just be the end.
There's a way to just manually.
Yes, there is actually. If we hit on under
You
here,
can do this from
there we go.
advance one at a time.
Yes. Okay. I would be so stoked. Don't do that.
That's not-
Is there a
We just
way-
gotta go back.
It's gonna advance like this.
No, that's what I just did, rotated it, turned it sideways.
Oh, well. I don't think this one's gonna let us do it, but
See, but there you go.
we can at least look at pictures though, so you get an idea of what
Somehow.
it looks like.
Maybe very slow and mechanical, but.
That's okay. Go to, oh, yeah, they're up.
All right,
That's okay.
do you wanna see that one again?
No.
I'll just,
I don't need to see that.
it's gonna be slow until I figure out exactly.
Okay, slide two. Slide two is good. Nope, slide three. Okay, that works. Slide three is right there, and then they're in order a little bit, so that's good. That might be,
It's just-
yeah.
It's gonna be slow, but this is.
So this will work just as well. So, if you're familiar with these kinds of TV shows, Bones or NCIS, CSI, if anybody's watched those, they use ground penetrating radar, actually in lots of those applications. It's really, really good, for picking up things like utilities, which is originally what this machinery was designed for. In archaeology, we don't really invent anything. We take it. So most of the technology that we use is actually engineering and survey equipment, and that's what this is for. So if you bump to the next slide. Maybe. Old school, y'all. There we go. So-
Leave that spot.
No shame, my friend. So it's really good for utilities locates. So if you're trying to find an old sewer pipe, or if you perhaps are looking for rebar so that you can cut concrete, so that you're not damaging the rest of your project. That's literally what this application was designed for. And we've taken it and we've used it for research. So what we've done is recalibrated and then used a little, the post-processing side is a little bit more fine grained. So it has two parts to it. You can see up here, this is exactly the machine that we have. It's the little trike, this is the brain for it, and then that is the antenna that collects the data. It's very, very important as you are thinking your way through about how this works. If this little radar, if this antenna is not on the ground surface, you're gonna lose data. And that's where we come into hiccups and our data looks funky when we're post-processing. So those are things that as we're pushing through, we kind of have to keep an eye on. And students are real great about pushing that, right? They like to push the carriage, but then they want to like treat it like a race car. And so you have to get them to slow down and make sure that we're not losing contact. Next slide. There we go. So there's a number of different ways that you can do this. The antenna also come in different megahertz too. So you can get a 400 or you can get a 900. The 400 is typically what we use. It looks like this. It also, the parts come in different little arrays depending on what you want to do with them. This is more for, I've seen this more for utility locate. It's pretty well compact. You can push it around. It's easy. This guy is a lot more rugged, I believe, and has a lot more versatility to it. You can also do a sled type. This is also radar. It's handheld. So this guy's got a chest strap and he's using the computer that way. And then they're just dragging that through the desert. This one is very handy if you're trying to go over or around like rocks and things. In an ideal setting, we would have somebody's front yard and it would be nice and grassy and free of roots and free of bramble and all the other things that you could pick up your data with, right? The reality is it doesn't really happen that way. So this guy is going to collect probably the most efficiently and going to help us get the kinds of data we need very quickly once we set up our equipment to do that. This guy also super helpful as well, though. It's a sled type, does the same thing. Okay. Okay, so if you're curious, ground penetrating radar, the radar is what we're most interested in. It's radio detection and ranging. It actually, the whole system, the way that it works is it's operating on a higher frequency electromagnetic reflection. So what it's doing is it's shooting a radar signal down into the ground, and then it's picking up on reflection. So things like changes in soil type, or if there's a particular signature, it will register that and then shoot the frequency back up. So it's basically bumping against density and then shooting data back up to the brain. And the brain is what is actually interpolating that data. So in profile, with a 3D scan, which is what we use, you can get a profile and you can get a plan view. I like to look at the profiles because they tell you different kinds of things. Sometimes the plan view doesn't look real pretty, but when you look at it in profile, you're gonna see some things. This looks like garble, right? It's actually kind of cool if you know how to interpret the data, and it doesn't take that much to interpret the data. Once you've seen it a couple of times and kind of get a hand for what you're looking at, you can see some things. So what's sticking out to me, see these guys right here? These are called parabola. That's how we know we've got a signature. There's a ring in that data somewhere. And then also, see this line here that's coming through like that? That's also a signature. So this tells me that we probably have a surface of some kind. I don't know what these are, but they're changes. And we call those anomalies. So as you're running the cart, you could do a couple of different things, or you might do them all in tandem. Our brain actually shows things in real time. So you don't have to collect it and then go back and process it to see your data. You can see it in real time if you've calibrated your stuff correctly. And that's the cool thing about this. So if I'm seeing this, as I'm pushing that cart, I might stop and throw a flag. And that might, if we didn't do anything else and we set up our grid system and we were throwing flags down, that might actually give you real-time data. Like you could maybe see the outline of something without even post-processing. So even those kinds of things are useful. We can also turn it into a plan view and see what's going on in our grid once we set up the grid and actually run the data. So the way that it works, I don't know what my next is. It's probably a deeper dive into, yeah. So the GPR signal itself and what it's shooting down, that radar, is in this frequency mode, so it's not harmful to you. It does operate on the frequency of like your radio, your television, importantly, your cell phone. So when we push this guy, you cannot have your cell phone on. We put everything in airplane mode. I actually will take phones away from students and tell them to put them in the car. Otherwise, it's going to give you, every time you get a data push, so if you get a phone call or text message, or if you've got a smartphone and you have email on it, every time it's pushing for data, it will interrupt. Sure. It will interrupt the signal. And what that looks like in your data is an interruption in that. So it's like this horrible stuff, and you've literally lost data from something silly, right? Like something having your cell phone on. So you should also not be pushing your GPR near a microwave or your TV or a radio tower. It just doesn't work well in those applications. But it's not harmful. Like this is the higher end of the electromagnetic spectrum. And this guy, like these things, gamma rays and ultraviolet stuff, that's the dangerous stuff. This is not doing it for. Yeah. So I won't get into the nuts and bolts of how it actually works, but suffice it to say that it does not work in every single application. For instance, it does not like water without a specific calibration technique. You can't actually do GPR in water. Not a fan, but it's possible to do it. You can actually, it works really well on ice. So you could push your carriage through ice and actually pick up a pretty good signature of what's going on beneath that ice. Again, it's a calibration. It actually does not like wet clay at all, or volcanic material. So there are sections of the United States where it just really doesn't work. And particularly around the world. Ironically, I won't show you this slide, but I will talk about it. When there is a national institute that teaches GPR, you can take a short course in it and pretty much learn what you need to know in 2 to 3 days. And then it's just a process of practicing. But they actually teach that institute in Louisiana, in the marsh, in some of the worst soils ever for pushing GPR. It is absolutely ridiculous. GSSI does that, I know. So it's just kind of like a story and what not to do, right? Maybe 9. That. So here again is what our data would look like parabola wise. And I just call them anomalies. They're things that are sticking out against the rest of that soil type and things that you might want to flag. If you look at this data, this is our profile again. Then if you look at it in plan view, it may tell you something different. So you'll notice here we have distance. So it's collecting things in real time, distance wise as you're pushing your cart. When we collect data, we do it in a 20 by 20 meter grid style, so a big square. And then you set up T on either end of your grid. And then you literally do a nice survey pattern, straight lines up and back on half-meter intervals. And that's what's going to give you this data. So that's distance up here. And then what it's telling you is every time it hits on a surface or something that's going to tell it, oh, I bumped into something and there's a change. It's a change in the frequency of the data that's coming back to the computer itself. And we measure that by time. So when you look at this, you can actually, you're looking at a time signature, and we call those time slices. That's how we talk about the data in GPRs. So this is telling you a lot of different things. So again, we have problem here, and then look what's happening here. Right? Are you seeing? We may not know what they are, but there's definitely something there, and it might be something worth investigating. That's just a tiny piece of that data. If we had all of it, it might tell us something very definitive. Make sense?
Yeah. How do you interpret, like, in the field, like, if you wanted to dig those, how deep that you would need to intersect that?
Yeah, so your time depth is over here. So this is going to be ground surface at 0, and then we're looking at 20, 40, 60, 80, probably centimeters in this time slice. Yeah. Okay. So if I wanted to look at the surface, then I know that I would need to dig somewhere around 30 centimeters. So it's pretty shallow.
Okay. You also look at the geological strata before you usually start. Okay.
It depends on what we're doing. So if I'm doing something non-invasive and somebody says, you know, we're not shovel testing here, but we want to run a GPR and see what we're seeing, we may not look at the strata that way. We would just rely on this data. But we can also look at geological maps and kind of understand what soils we're working in before we do that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That kind of eliminates some of the like the lines on it.
It could potentially. Okay. We know we have a change in something right there. Yes. Yeah. It's not going to tell you like specific soil type or anything like that. It's literally just giving you changes in density. So if we can find 10. I won't do that one. Go to the next. So here is an example of what your data might look like based on where you're at, which is why I'm saying that it doesn't like wet clay. The reason why is because the parabola are so narrow, it's really hard to even definitively understand what it's telling you. There are experts. I am intermediate. I am not an expert, but we do have folks that do this for a living, and they can probably calibrate this machine to get some data out of this wet clay. I would probably not even attempt that myself. Plus, we don't really have that issue here. We're not going to have a wet clay scenario. Most of our soils are pretty well drained here. Or if you're in the mountains, you don't even have soil, in which case this is not useful at all, right? Yeah. So we like dry sand. The 400 megahertz antenna that we use will give us a depth to 8 to 10 feet, I think. And you could use a 900, I think that goes deeper. If you set your machine correctly, this is also good for shallow applications. They use it a lot in forensics, and in police investigation when we're looking for shallow graves, murder victims, things like that. So it's actually quite useful in a number of different scenarios. I don't do bodies, and I certainly don't do forensics, so that's not my application. I use it particularly for. So, as I was saying, here's where they train in the world's worst soil. I don't even know. I like this map though, because it kind of gives you a good overview of where you could potentially run. And so green is going to be a pretty good, nice profile, good area to run stuff. And then your brown and your purples are going to be not so great. So you'll notice where we are. We have some pretty good likelihood for being able to run a GPR and get some good data out there. We're going to skip all of this and probably go down to 24. So I want to show you what the data looks like. So
Pretty good.
yeah, not bad at all. So my first foray with GPR was actually in coastal South Carolina. Our soils are wet-ish, but they're also sandy, so they're well drained. Depending on where you are, your data might not be great, but you could also get some pretty meaningful results. So if you're wondering what this is actually the front yard of the plantation house, which is right here. There's a canal system that runs here and then along here, and then this is the water field over here. This is a road that takes us, if we keep going, we'll go out to the rice dikes and eventually out into the Sandy Delta, which during the colonial era and into the antebellum was the height of rice culture in the New World. So lots of abandoned rice fields, settlements, plantation houses, things like that. And that's really where the primary research is. So I use GPR for a number of things, but my first foray into this was actually to understand soils a little bit better. You're looking right here, these little triangles, these are all positive shovel tests. And the little red areas right there are places where I targeted excavated based on this little guy right here. So what happened was, nobody had ever actually done any sort of archaeological excavation on the North Sandy, and I was not understanding my soils properly. So I did a number of shovel tests and was hitting this, what I thought was sterile subsoil, and actually turned out to be a fill episode. And I wasn't understanding what was going on. I was looking for this house, which we thought originally might have been over here. This is a third build iteration. So it's a newer house as it looks right now. I was looking for the original 1700s house for this plantation. And I had some map that showed a structure in this area, and I thought that might have been the house. I was looking for Miss Ketty's house. But when I did the shovel testing, I was not finding any sort of domestic artifacts or anything like that. Just a lot of brick and rubble and weird metal pieces, a few pieces of glass, but not like there should have been ceramics and everyday items and things like that there, and I just wasn't seeing it. And I thought I was hitting that sterile sub. And so we packed up. It was just a small little research trip. We packed up and I went home and I was thinking about it. And I'm like, you know, something's just not right here. What's going on? And that guy right there said, we should run some GPR and just see. And so I got trained on how to do GPR, and we came back out. And so what you're looking at is actually, I believe, 8 full grids, 20 by 20 grids, and then partials over here. And you'll see, even though this is a pretty small image, we'll look at it out in a little bit more finer detail. There's a number of different things going on, right? the first thing you notice is this big line right here, right? You see that? That's a definitive ring. Like we knew that is actually a void in data. GPR doesn't like metal. It won't go through the metal, so it's not picking up a signature underneath it. It's just what it's seeing right there. So we knew we probably had something funky like a pipe or something like that, that would have been cast iron or something. Yeah. And then see the squares down here, right? You'll also see a little line section right here that we think is probably the original approach to this structure. And then there are at least 3 building episodes out this way too. Now, notice this down here looks different, right? It didn't stitch very well, and there's some garble over there too. That's water. That's what water does to our imagery, and that's why the GPR doesn't like it that much. It just shows up with this movement stuff. If you're running it over water, this is a mixture of water and soil. So that's what is making it do that. That's just that wet low-lying area. If you were to run this over water with some special equipment, it's going to give you different kinds of data. But for my purposes, I was like, boo, not seeing anything. So you want to hit the next one? Stand up. This is important. So based on what we were seeing in the GPR, we knew that we had some kind of structure. And so I changed my game plan a little bit, and I just put in a series of test units. I wanted to know, where's that sterile stub? What did I do wrong? And so these kind of give us a better idea. And what you're looking at here, this is the bottom of a test unit. This is 2. See this guy right here? That's actually the ghost mark of brick. That is a full brick run foundation, which dang it, if it should be a house, right? It's not a house. It's some rich guy's barn. I know, it's a barn. And what you're actually looking at is 2 different building episodes. So this is brick, and then they've got a little area that's come up this way. And the black stuff here is actually burned. We burned this farm. So what we were actually running into in the shovel test, we didn't go down far enough because we didn't know. There was nothing actually to take a look at to let us know that we hadn't gone down far enough. So this area was actually kept, and you can see it here. This is a profile shot. You can see the bump out here. This is a fill episode, which is what we were hitting with our shovel test, and we weren't going down any further because it looks like sterile sub. And the reality is, I think what happened was those canals have to be dredged every so often, and they get clogged up. So they're taking their canal dredge and resealing this fill. So what's happened is this farm was burned. They didn't need it anymore, probably in the late 19th century. It gets covered over with this big fill episode, and then they replant in the 1950s what they call Highland rice. I don't even know what Highland rice is, but the property owner says, oh yeah, we planted out there. And now it's this nice grassy front yard. So, and you can see it clearly in the stitching there. So I learned some things that day, like really GPR is very, very helpful for giving you that broad picture. If we had just shovel tested and not done GPR and then come back to do a little bit of ground truthing, we would never have understood that whole area the way that it was. Now, if I can you bump this again, 26 might no, go 27. There we go. So this is, to me, the utility of this and really making a case for not having to put a shovel in the ground if you don't want to. Because this is telling us all kinds of very cool data. And it might actually, particularly for Fort Floyd, it may give you sort of a direction to go, right? If we had data, something similar to this that's coming out of that yard across the street, we may say, there's really no need to put a shovel in the ground. Or you may be curious and go, oh, let's investigate. So this kind of data is going to give you some choices. If I had never been able to go back out into that front yard at Rochelle, this data right here is actually pretty cool. And
maybe we didn't really need to do the shovel testing, I would argue that we did, but the one by ones, we got enough data to know that that was actually a barn, it wasn't a house. And if you're looking at this, these are our time slices. So this is at 30, this is at 40, and this is at 50 centimeters below surface. And they're telling you different kinds of things. So at 30, that's our shallow. We're gonna see that ring right here. That's the pipe. We actually did ground truth that, because it went across the whole field, and I was like, it has to be a pipe. And one of my students was like, I'm gonna go find it. So it was fine. So at 30, it looks kind of garbled up here. We're not really sure what's going on, but you can kind of like make out something that looks angular. As humans, we like to build that way on 90 degrees. Usually things are nice and crisp. So they give a different signature in the data than natural things do. So I'm always looking for things that are squarish, right? So you can see building episode here. There's kind of something going on over here. There's a little round guy right there that I still don't know what that is, and we may never know. That's okay. I feel like I've gotten the data to make the case that this was a barn and that it burned. It was probably rice processing facility, or maybe even cattle. We don't really know, and I'm okay with that at this point. I'm pretty sure that this is not the main house, which is what that is. At 40, it shows you a few more building episodes. So we still get that signature of this square here, but then there's another bump out over here that may have been some sort of enclosure or something like that. That was temporary, but we're still seeing the building signature for that. It doesn't necessarily need to be brick for us to be able to see it. It's a change in density. And then over here, we're getting these guys right here. And when I first looked at this data, I saw this and I was like, oh, chimney fall. We have chimney fall. It's rubble. Yeah. It's this whole area, particularly in the Santee Delta, there was a bounty on handmade brick well up into the 1980s. So people were still in brick all the time, which is probably what happened to some of this foundation. And I think that rubble may have been pushed and then people are pilfering brick. It's also very, very remote. So if it hasn't been pilfered, then people are taking it and they're reusing it for other purposes too. I think some of this brick is probably in that 1958 Rochelle house too. So whatever you have, you're gonna reuse or it gets sold. $5 a brick in the 1980s, yeah, I hate that. We've lost a lot of structure out there. So, so you're seeing these two piles right here are actually brick rubble piles, and they don't, yeah, no chimney, dang it. And then something over here that I have not ground truth. I don't necessarily feel the need to dig every single one, but I like the snapshot and it gives you a good idea of what you may have. And if there is a reason to put a shovel in the ground. And in this case, it was important to me. It's also important to the property owner to understand what was going on. So that's kind of a snapshot, yes.
How long ago was this? Was this in the beginning of your education and learning? Or
Yes.
is this like now?
This was taken in 2018, 2019. It was actually part of my dissertation research. I'm a non-traditional student. I did cultural resource management for about 12 years before I went back and got my master's. And then I was already poor being a master's program for 2 years. So I thought, I'll just be. Yeah. And there was a reason to do that. I love what I do and I don't regret that decision at all. So yeah, this was 2018, 2019. And I had some help too, and I've since learned a little bit more about the unit and how to more efficiently operate it. And then the post-processing that goes into it as well. I did all the post-processing myself with some help from a geophys expert.
How do you deal with artifacts?
In what terms?
Well, shards, pattern shards, something like
Yes.
that.
Anything that we find, we take it back to the lab, we clean it, we process it. We take measurements on it, and then it really depends on where it came from. So if we're getting material out of here, this is private property, and it's up to the property owner as to what they would like to see done with it. I actually have a curation agreement with the Village Museum out in McClellanville for things that are coming off of the south side of the Santee.
And then on the north side, which is where this house is, we have an agreement with the Charleston Museum. So once we have curated to their standard, and there's a database system that goes with that, then all of those artifacts get reposited.
But how does this help you find those artifacts? How would you make the leap?
Sure.
between it?
So if you have a structure, like I didn't know anything, right? In this case, I did this in a weird way, but if we were gonna start, say if we're gonna start at Fort Floyd. And we know that we have structure here. In consultation, like you guys would tell me what you want done. If we see something and you're fine with that, then we don't shovel it. But if you want to, then we're gonna come up with a plan. And in consultation with groups that are interested, you tell me what you would like to see done with the artifacts if we find them. Sometimes we don't, like the GPR is not gonna tell you really about artifacts specifically. But if you're getting data like this, there's a good possibility you're gonna get artifacts associated with them. So I'll come up with a plan, we will talk about it. And wherever those artifacts need to reside, we will have that plan in place before we ever put a shovel in.
So is LiDAR more survey-ish than this?
LiDAR operates a little bit differently. So what it's doing, and I'm glad you said that's one of my favorite techniques. Yeah, love me some LiDAR.
Larry Vogt has been looking at Fort Buffington for years.
Yes.
He's using LiDAR.
Yeah, it's great. And we keep so the technology keeps evolving. And so now you can run LiDAR in a number of different ways. Usually it's a plane scenario and they're literally shooting a laser at the Earth's surface and mapping it to reveal level vegetation. So it's any little nook and cranny involved. It's reflecting that data and then it makes a big point cloud and you have to process that. But once you have that, then you have a series of hillshades that are literally going to tell you basically all the nooks and crannies on your landscape. And you can rotate it too. So the data is going to show you different kinds of things depending on the angle of the sun and the time of day that they took that data. So, and we're getting better at it too. I've seen some really good LiDAR imagery. For Fort Floyd, I'm not sure that it would tell us anything at all because most of that stuff is going to be subsurface, right? But if you have a modified landscape, if you're familiar with the LiDAR that they're doing in South America with all the Mayan networks.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Without having that big landscape image, you would never know what's going on there, right? So that's a really useful tool. Sorry, yeah, it's all above ground. It's not gonna tell you anything below ground, whereas this will. So a little bit differences. We do use them in tandem though. Yeah, we sit Saturday nights sometimes and look at LiDAR imagery. That's what we do. I'm not even joking. And you can learn so much from it. Yeah, you're welcome. Great question.
She said she was.
Does anybody have anything else? It's kind of a lot to process. It's technical, but it's not so much that you can't wrap.
Or like here, I knew where there was a lot of pottery. If you were using the radar, how big a piece would it pick up, or would you see a signal if you ran over?
That's a good question.
Pottery?
So if we know we have lots of pottery is going to present as a burn signature, it's a low fire. And so the organic material is going to present a little bit different, which is why we can see these areas in here that are brick and rubble. They are that dense area. If you're near a kiln or a pottery producing facility, it's probably going to produce data that looks something like this. It's not going to give you individual shards. We don't have that ability yet.
The resolution isn't to that point.
Right.
No,
It'll pick variations up,
Yeah.
but it won't pick.
yeah,
the resolution.
yeah,
Small.
that's true. They do make a handheld GPR that is high resolution. So this data is collected at half meter intervals. We can shrink that data collection and get more fine grain and do quarter meter, or they also make a handheld. And so that would be helpful, I believe, if you knew exactly, in this case, for pottery film, if you knew pretty much where that was located, it might give you that signature to maybe get to a shirt. But it would have to be really discreet. I mean, they're handheld and nobody wants to go crawling on their hands and knees, right? But if you had like a smaller section to target, that might be something. Good question. I hadn't thought about that.
If you found a cannonball in right by the place where you think that, gathering place. Then it's station sign, for instance. That was a cannon. It said that God lived it. And some of the people from the Buffy family, actually, they moved on towards Canton that way.
Okay.
But, that was one of, in the house, the old cabin fell in, and new people that lived there way back. That cannonball was there, now the chimney has gone, and it was a big spring there. And, I found a cannonball right there. So, we know there's something going on there.
Yeah. And that might be a good application for this, if your spraying is not burbling so much that the ground is constant.
No, it's now it's kind of just like water place, you know,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, it might be a good candidate for GPR for sure. I'm looking, you said cabin and I looked right out here and I was like,
No, it wasn't.
That's
that
wasn't right there.
yeah. But I'm thinking too about landscape too,
Like,
like,
if you know what the station sign is, it's right near that.
okay,
The station is kind of associated with Port Floyd, it's about a mile and a half,
Okay.
towards Auraria, and a mile from Auraria. That's where the stockade was,
Okay.
and there is like 2 flat places in that area also that I think was a storage, like for their, you know, horses and tents and supplies and stuff. And this cabin that she's talking about, is there.
okay.
But that might be something that LiDAR could lay out a little bit better, because now it's heavily wooded.
Yeah.
Hard to see.
Yeah.
But also the, Auraria area is another one that we are putting on the National, Trail Tours Registry. But the Auraria is a lot larger than what you can see now. And actually I have another part that I'll actually, came down through by the Etowah over towards Pine Valley, you know where Pine Valley is?
Yeah, Tam knows all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we could show that
Yeah,
in our documentation would be great, because it was a huge site,
yeah.
and it had like.
We could go LiDAR and look at it. I'm sure there's publicly available stuff for this area.
There is LiDAR for this county, but, I didn't have luck when I tried to talk to the guy who, is doing the GIS here in the county.
Okay.
So he made it sound like it was difficult to get any of that.
Okay, we can figure out.
Okay.
There might be some other outlets that will hold that. Sometimes there are government outlets that have that data, and then counties will come in and post-process it. But if we can get the raw data, that might be a post-processing. Yeah. Okay, things to think about for sure. Yeah, I think the LiDAR might help a lot in terms of like just removing the woods and seeing what we see surface wise.
Do you also use, historical photographs? I know I work for the government, we use it from my site.
We
but-
use all the stuff.
Okay.
Any, yeah, and that's the basis of historical archaeology in
Yes.
general. Like any plat I can get my hands on,
Yeah.
we'll overlay it in the GIS, and then we also look at historical imagery, topography, modern aerial maps and good times telling things, yeah. Yeah, I will use everything.
I was just wondering, do you have, access to a source for the, historical aerial photography in areas? Because
Yeah,
sometimes those are difficult.
yeah, sometimes they're hard to find. I don't know, I'll have to do some digging. Yeah, you're pretty good. So, there are ways, I think, to see what we can see, for sure.
Yes.
And all those things. The cool thing is, you know, if we all put our heads together, we all know stuff and I know stuff. Collectively, we can make a pile of things.
How-
And then, yeah, just like share information. And I'm happy to throw things in a GIS, like if you find a plat that you think is helpful, we can overlay it. We'll geo-reference it on modern aerial imagery and overlay it. So we can understand exactly what is going on in that landscape. And it's gonna make more sense to you because you're gonna see modern landmarks too. So I'm a big fan of the overlays. They just help you understand your landscape really, really well.
Yes.
We do that with photos, with any sort of historical documentation that we have, then it all creates this really nice, rich, robust, bigger story, right? That you wouldn't get at with just one piece of data. So that's the idea, is to collaborate and bring all of these things together and tell a more holistic story than what we have right now.
Yeah, Jeff Bishop was a former president for our association, and he was able to do Google Earth over the maps for the Trail of Tears.
Yes.
And found a bunch of stuff that way.
Yes, yeah. It's amazing too, how much we continue to find. You know, people have this idea in their head, I think that history is stagnant sometimes, and that, you know, what we have right now, we could possibly do a better job. And I would argue that we can. There's still more to be learned, and there's still more data out there. There's still, you know, maps in some granny's attic somewhere, I guarantee there are, and historical photographs, right? Things that could really help tell a richer story than what we have.
And there may be something in your library.
Yeah,
I went in one day and I asked permission to go into one of the closets, and they had a file cabinet in there, and I said, well, what's in the file cabinet? Well, we don't know.
Yeah, sometimes
So-
people don't know what they.
Found tons of maps.
Yeah.
In the
Oh,
file
man,
cabinet.
that's the
That just
right
went
part.
crazy.
wow. Yeah, you just don't know, like, and that's happened to me too, just like working in the Delta. People often have, oral history, you know, there are things that they know that are stored in their head and they don't think they're important.
Right.
But to us, like folks like us that want to know and fill in those gaps, those things are really invaluable, but you have to pull it out of people because they don't think it's important, or they think that you already know. And that's, I can't tell you how many times that's happened out here to me. Oh, Kenny, I thought you knew that. No, I didn't. I don't have that knowledge base from growing up in the same team. And we can make the case that here is the same way. People have lots of knowledge and they don't think that it's important. So I think there's all kinds of things that we can do to get at questions and do it constructively and collaboratively.
I can remember when there was a branch that went from toward right up next to the Baptist church, came down through there and went down by the theater. And that was down in there where we think Fort Floyd is.
Yeah. See? And we don't know that.
And she
Oh, you
didn't
didn't
know
know
that.
that?
She's not gonna be alone here for much longer, so get all the information.
Yeah, we're interviewing you.
Yes.
Well, Kennedy, I appreciate you and Mike
Yes.
for your time and effort.
You are.
I have some membership forms over here.
Okay.
We'd love to have you as part of our efforts. We do use archaeology frequently on sites. We're using it now. We're Fort Meade to this over in Floyd County. And we're trying to get it certified and classified as a site of importance on the Trail of Tears. That's basically what we are doing, is preserving the history and heritage throughout this North Georgia area. So we'd love to have you.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. I would be honored to serve in whatever capacity.
So I have membership forms, I have maps, and I have a door prize, which you just stick around for the door prize.
Just comment on this, that we had a cemetery done.
Yeah.
and the difficult part was getting the data plain
Yeah.
and meaningful map drawn.
Yes.
That was,
Sometimes that is a challenge. It's, Mike actually did the overlay that you saw of all of the grids on aerial imagery, and it took us a while to get that sorted. So that is,
Yeah, everything takes time.
Yeah.
Especially with this equipment, like it takes time to compile
They did the survey in 3 days and we went a year.
Yeah, that's not surprising to me.
I promise not to take that. Do you think that, y'all could, get the GIS part of, the university to possibly help with those things?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I think GIS is not an issue. I already have access to that. So, yeah, I don't think it's a big deal.
You know better than me.
Okay. Yeah, no, we have access to it. Yeah.
So I'm going to do a brief business meeting, and then I'll let y'all go so you can get